Okay, so probably next we're gonna have a look at Clinging, which is the second real song, third track on the album. And it actually was, if I recall correctly, the first song that I completed. At least it was the first attempt of writing a song. And for those of you who don't know the story, during the first COVID lockdown, I took some Skype lessons with Richard Henschel from Haken, and we discussed a couple of songwriting ideas, and I basically was not that much interested in learning something new on the guitar, but I love to get into other people's minds and learn about their way of thinking. And I'm loving Haken, and I was always intrigued by the question, how do they think about the stuff? How do they come up with their ideas? How do they develop stuff? And yeah, what leads to the ending results that we can hear on their albums? And so I prepared just a little theme on acoustic guitar, which turned out to end up as the intro of the song. And I showed it to Rich, and we discussed a bit about how we could develop this, which element of a song this part might end up being, and he suggested that it might be a strong chorus, and I agreed, and so I used it both as an intro and as a chorus, and later on in the instrumental section as a part to return to get some continuity in the song. Yes, and
so his influence is pretty can clearly be pointed out when looking at the song.
Yes, it was only that part basically, or maybe the follow-up. There's that Dorian lead theme over it, and yes, but basically that was one of the two things we discussed. We also talked about several parts of Boomerang, but regarding Clinging, this was the only part that existed. And from there, the whole song grew quite naturally, and it actually developed as we can hear it now on the album. So I didn't jump back and forth and added a part before another one. And it wasn't like a jigsaw, but it was a pretty linear process. And I really enjoyed it, if I'm thinking back to it. It was I was very excited. It was right in the beginning. I had lots of ideas, lots of things that I wanted to try out, and when I'm looking back at the song, I'm pretty happy with it. And especially, as I said, there was lots of experimenting, and I knew I wanted to be it more or less ordinary structured song, but very expansive, with a longer instrumental section where I wanted to take some motifs and play around with them. And in the later part, there is this lovely mellow section with the vocals building up, where you could tell us a bit about later on.
Yeah.
But yes, that was a really great moment I love to remember, because I had the lyrics to a certain extent, and I knew what the song should be about, and I was missing something for this mellow part towards the end. And I stumbled upon an old poem by a guy called William Wordsworth, and I read it, and it just fit the topic perfectly, and I started playing around with it, and from a metric point of view, it also fitted like it was written for that part. And so yeah.
But is it the actual lyrics, or did you just get inspired by it?
No, it's the actual poem, which I used as there are 3 layers of vocals, and the basic layer, which starts the whole thing, is actually the poem.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So can we take a listen to the intro you talked about?
Yes, of course. Let me get back. It's just this simple part here. So that basically was the first idea.
Super simple. And when does it come back in the song?
It returns. Before we get into that mellow build-up, here we are again. So without context, it's just the same.
Yeah, let's listen to it with context.
Mm-hmm. It's a bit risky, but we can try.
I clearly remember this part from giving me nightmares because of the hard pick attack on the deeper note, on the lower note, deeper note. And I think I really had to automate it down. If you want, we can take a look in my project.
Yeah, sure. But I'm not sure if it still gave you nightmares in the end, because I recall that you wanted me to re-record that part and to split it on 2 tracks so that the notes got enough room to ring out.
Right. Yeah, I think that fixed it, because, well, there still is some weird automation going on. We can have a look. Not in this part,
Yes.
though. Wait, I switch over. So now we are in my session, and as you can see, you were right. You re-recorded it, and you've split the part into 2. So the first note, the lower note, is way softer. Now listen to it in solo. And in context. And funny enough, we do have a different rhythm guitar sound here. I said earlier that I used only one, which was clearly not true, as I just found out. Let's take a look in this part, actually, because we're using some dual rectifier. Who would have thought? From STL Amp Hub without the integrated cabinet. But here comes Mr. Bogren again, who released a set of IR presets, and I have used this one. So we have a totally different rhythm guitar than on other tracks, and I can remember now that something was bothering me about the sound from the other tracks.
Okay, bothering in which way?
It just didn't fit the song.
Okay.
Somehow it sounded weird. It didn't connect. And this one sounds somehow beefier, and it just fits the mood better. It also locks better with the bass, which is in this part a MIDI bass. We can take a quick look at the bass here, because we have MIDI bass as well as the original tracks you played. The MIDI bass got converted from the original recording, and we had a bad noise problem. There was some humming on the tracks, and so you had to re-record, but it still wasn't perfect, so I decided to switch part by part between MIDI bass and the bass DI. MIDI bass is a bit problematic for me because it never sounds as organic as I want to, but especially in parts like this, it just works. I mean, it sounds totally robotic on its own.
Yes.
But in context, nobody would notice. But
No.
there are parts where you would probably notice, especially in the quieter ones. So I used the bass DI. And back to MIDI bass. So it was really a part-by-part decision.
Yeah, and that's really interesting for me to know because we made lots of jokes about you replacing me with the gin bass. And in the end, I didn't know, and you didn't tell me where you used the MIDI bass and where you used what I recorded. So that's interesting.
Could you tell when you listened to it? Did you have an idea?
Yes, there were some parts on the album where I thought, that sounds like a MIDI bass, but never in a bad way. It just sounded different to what I had in mind from my recording sessions.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think it turned out to be okay. It's not the ideal scenario, but it fixed a lot of our problems. And it's totally fine in the result. So talking about bass and layering again, I also combined both tracks in certain songs. In Boomerang, for example, we have bass DI and MIDI bass playing together, because apparently each of the tracks has something I was missing in the other track. Let's listen to the bass and solo here. And let's mute the DI. And switch to the MIDI bass. Sorry, DI bass. And both of them together. The DI track brought a nice low end, but it didn't have any high end. It was very muffled sounding, and the MIDI bass has a lot of attack, and they both go very well together. So I used the combination of them basically throughout the whole song.
Yeah, it's a bit like with what you did with the violins.
It is. Yes. Yes, true.
Similar approach.